The twin suns of planet Solara shined over the giant stone platform. On it stood the ancient sword, tall, shining, and unmoved for thousands of years. No one had ever lifted it. Aliens from many planets had tried. Kings, warlords, warriors, even psychic masters had all stepped forward, but each one failed. The sword did not move. Some were thrown back by its strange energy. Others just felt cold fear and gave up. It was called the Blade of the First, and legend said it would only rise for the one who was truly worthy. The people believed the sword would save them during a great danger, but the danger never came. And the sword never chose anyone. Today, another crowd had gathered. Thousands of aliens stood around the stone. Some wore colorful robes, others had metal armor. Flying drones recorded everything. News channels across the galaxy were watching. A loud voice echoed through the air. "Step forward, champion Thrax of Karun." A tall, red-scaled alien with 4 arms walked to the stone. He roared and raised his fists. The crowd cheered. He grabbed the sword with all his strength. Nothing happened. His muscles bulged. His claws scratched the handle. Still, the sword did not move. Then the stone glowed bright blue. A shockwave blasted out, throwing Thrax 10 meters back. He hit the ground hard and didn't get up. The crowd fell silent. Another failure. At the edge of the crowd, a small group stood quietly. They looked very different from the rest. Their bodies were soft, their clothes simple. They were humans, and it was their first time on Solara. Their leader was a man named Mason Carter, a former soldier, now part of the United Galactic Peace Program. He looked at the sword with quiet eyes. What's so special about it? He asked. An alien guide beside him replied, "It chooses only the worthy, but no one is ever worthy." Mason chuckled. "Maybe it's just stuck." The alien didn't laugh. Later that day, Mason walked closer to the stone platform. His group had been given permission to observe the sword. No one expected anything from humans. They were still new to the Galactic Alliance. Some aliens saw them as weak or simple. Mason felt something strange as he got near the sword. A soft, like a quiet voice in his bones. He placed his hand on the stone. Suddenly, the sword glowed faintly. The crowd gasped. "Did you see that?" Someone shouted. "It moved." "No, impossible." Mason pulled his hand back. He frowned. "Weird." "Guards, step forward. Step away from the blade." Mason raised his hands. All right. But the whispers had already begun. A human touched it. The sword reacted. No alien ever made it glow. Later that night, alien leaders held a secret meeting. Some were angry. Some were scared. The sword had never reacted before, not even to their greatest warriors, and now a human? "This cannot be," one said. "He is not even from this part of the galaxy." "We must study him," said another. "Maybe it's a trick." Or maybe, a third said slowly, the legends were true. The blade will rise when the outsider comes. Meanwhile, Mason sat alone in his quarters. He couldn't sleep. His hand still felt warm from the touch. He kept thinking about the sword. Why did it react to him? He wasn't special. He was just a man from Earth, a soldier with scars and bad memories. He never believed in magic swords or ancient legends, but he had seen it, the light, the hum, the way the sword moved. Just a little, like it wanted to rise, like it had been waiting. Just before dawn, Mason made a choice. He walked back to the platform, alone. The guards were gone. The area was quiet. The sky was still dark, stars glowing above. He stood before the sword. He reached out his hand again. As soon as he touched it, the stone shook. The sword glowed bright blue. The ground cracked under his feet. The light spread across the platform, and the sword, heavy and ancient, moved. It lifted an inch off the stone, then stopped. Mason stepped back, heart pounding. The sword had reacted. It had really moved. Wasn't imagining it. Behind him, someone had seen it. A shadow ran off into the dark. The word would spread. The sword had moved. For a human, asterisk, the recording played again and again across the galaxy. A human had touched the sword. And it moved. No alien had ever made that happen. The video went viral in just hours. News drones zoomed in on Mason's calm face. They slowed the footage, zoomed on the glow, played the sound of the sword humming. Over and over, some aliens were amazed, some were furious, some were afraid, and deep in a hidden place beneath Solara's capital, a secret chamber came alive. A circle of tall-robed figures stood in darkness. Their eyes glowed faintly. The sword moved, one hissed. The ancient signal has returned, whispered another. And it moved. For a human, said the third. They looked at each other in silence. Finally, the leader spoke. Then he must be taken or destroyed. Far above, Mason stood at a balcony, watching a strange sunset. Solara's twin suns were dipping below the cliffs, casting golden and purple light across the sky. It was beautiful and unsettling. Everything had changed. He didn't ask for this. He wasn't a hero. He was just trying to help build peace between humans and aliens. But now, the galaxy looked at him like he was someone special, and Mason hated that feeling. His door chimed out. It was Kira, an alien scientist with silver skin and glowing tattoos. We've run tests, she said, walking in quickly. The sword is reacting to your biology. It responded to your DNA signature and your brain waves. Mason frowned. So? Maybe it's just a glitch. She gave him a look. The sword was made long before humans left their own planet. How could it be a glitch? Mason turned away. I don't want to be part of this. You don't have a choice, Kira said softly. The sword chose you. Later that night, Mason felt something again. The hum. It wasn't from the sword this time. It was inside his head, like a whisper, like a memory that didn't belong to him. He saw flashes in his mind, a burning world, a silver army standing before, a great darkness, a sword raised high, glowing brighter than the stars, and then silence. He woke up sweating. Suddenly, a loud noise hit the hallway. Boom. An explosion. The lights flickered. Mason grabbed his sidearm and ran out. Smoke filled the air. Guards were shouting. An alarm echoed. Then he saw them, black armored intruders. Fast, silent, deadly. They weren't soldiers from any known planet. They were shadow hunters, assassins from an ancient cult. They had come for him. Mason ducked behind cover and returned fire. One went down, but two more rushed him. He fought hard, using every move he learned back on Earth. He wasn't the strongest, but he was smart, fast, and dirty. He survived, just barely. When the smoke cleared, 3 bodies lay still. One was missing a mask. Underneath, its face was not alien. It was almost human. The next morning, Solara was shaken. Everyone had seen the attack. Mason had survived, but questions exploded like fire across the stars. Who were those killers? Why did one look like a human? And why would anyone want to kill the one chosen by the sword? The council held a secret meeting. Alien leaders sat in a dark room, tense and silent. One of them, a huge creature with crystals in his skin, slammed the table. We must protect the human. Another hissed, no, he is dangerous. The sword moved. That power is unknown. It could destroy everything. A third whispered, he must be tested or contained. Outside, crowds gathered around the sword again, but no one dared touch it. Everyone was watching Mason now. He walked up to the platform again, tired, bruised, confused. He stared at the sword. I don't want this, he whispered, but the sword glowed again, this time brighter. He placed both hands on the hilt. And slowly, carefully he pulled. The sword lifted. Not completely, but more than before. It hummed louder, and the glow spread to his arms like it was scanning him. Suddenly, a flash of light shot out of the blade and painted a floating image in the air. A glowing map. Everyone gasped. Mason stared. It showed a place deep under the surface of Zalara. A hidden chamber, and a single word appeared in the alien language. Key. Mason turned to the crowd, confused. What is this thing unlocking? The sword was no longer just a symbol. It had become a target. And so had Mason Carter. In the cold dark of space, a signal flashed across old satellites, a silent message in a dead language. It traveled faster than light, jumping from one secret node to another. When it reached the final receiver, something ancient awoke. A single eye opened on a distant moon, glowing red. It scanned the message. The sword had moved. The human had touched it. The time had come. A dark voice whispered from the shadows, "The last key is active. Send the Reapers. The human must not reach the vault." Back on Zalara, Mason stood at the edge of a cliff, overlooking the jungle below. His body still buzzed from touching the sword again. The image of the floating map stayed burned in his mind. It pointed to something hidden deep under the planet's surface. The sword had shown him the way, but no one else could see the path. Only him, and that scared everyone, even his allies. In the council hall, the alien leaders argued again. One slammed his metal claw on the table. "That sword belongs to Zalara, not some Earth soldier." Another, with skin like smoke, growled, "He is an outsider. We do not know what he is capable of." But Kira, the alien scientist who had helped Mason, stood firm. "The sword chose him, not you, not any of us. You all failed." "He didn't." They glared at her. No one spoke for a long moment. Then a soft voice said, "He must be watched, or we risk everything." Mason knew they didn't trust him. He could feel it in every look. So, without telling anyone, he left that night. Following the sword's map. He traveled deep into the wild forests of Zalara, climbing cliffs, crossing rivers, and passing ruins covered in glowing moss. The sword hung on his back, quiet, heavy, but warm. Something was guiding him. Not just the map, but the sword itself. It wanted him to find something. 3 days later, Mason reached a strange hill. It was flat, round, and covered in stone carvings that looked like humans, even though they were thousands of years old. He touched the ground. The sword glowed. Then the ground opened. A circular door spun to the side, revealing a black tunnel going straight down. He didn't hesitate. He stepped inside. The deeper Mason went, the colder it got. Lights came on by themselves, following his footsteps. Symbols glowed on the walls. Some were alien, but others were in English. His heart beat faster. "How?" he whispered. The tunnel ended in a large underground chamber, circular, silent, and massive. In the center was a tall pedestal with a glass cube on top. Inside the cube was a metal device shaped like a star, and written below it, "To the one who returns, Earth will remember." Mason couldn't move. Someone had been here before. Another human. Thousands of years ago. Suddenly, a loud alarm echoed through the chamber. Red lights flashed. Mason spun around, drawing his weapon. Something was coming down the tunnel fast. Then he saw them. Reaper. Dark armored beings with pale faces and glowing red eyes. Half machine, half alien. Fast, silent, deadly. Mason fired first. They didn't stop. He rolled behind cover, blasting one in the chest. It sparked and collapsed. Another one jumped down from the ceiling. Claw raised. Mason pulled the sword from his back, not to swing it, but to block. The Reaper's claws hit the blade and shattered. The sword hummed and released a pulse of energy, blasting the attacker away. Mason gasped. "It protected me." Then the blade whispered in his mind for the first time, "You are not the first, but you are the last." Mason fought like a soldier from Earth, smart, quick, brutal. He used the environment. He used traps. He used Fear. When the last Reaper fell, Mason stood alone, breathing hard. The sword pulsed once more, and the device inside the glass cube floated up and into his hand. It melted into the sword like it was part of it. Another piece of the puzzle. Another door unlocked. Above ground, news spread again. The human had survived an assassination. Team. He had entered a hidden ruin. He had found technology that knew Earth. Now Mason wasn't just a soldier. He was a symbol. To some, a savior. To others, a threat. But to one ancient enemy watching from deep space, he was a problem that needed to be erased. Send the fleet, the dark voice said. The human must die before he reaches the core. Asterisk. It started with a dream. Mason was standing in space. No suit, no sound, just stars and silence. In front of him floated the sword. It wasn't glowing anymore. It was cracked, dying. Behind it, something massive moved in the dark, too big to understand, too far to see clearly. Then a whisper filled his head. The first protector failed. Do not fail again. He reached for the sword, but it shattered in front of him. And he woke up screaming. Back in the real world, Mason sat up, breathing hard. The sword lay beside his bed, glowing softly. He wasn't sure what scared him more, the dream, or the fact that the sword was dreaming with him. He looked at it. What are you trying to show me? But the sword stayed silent. At the same time, deep in a science tower on Zalara, Kira studied the data Mason brought back from the hidden vault. Her fingers moved fast across the alien console. But the more she decoded, the more confused she became. Files weren't written in any alien language. They were written in ancient English. Earth has been here before, she whispered. Then one file unlocked itself. A projection appeared in the air. It showed Earth, but not how it looks today. This Earth was burning. Pieces of the planet were breaking off. The skies were black, and then a voice spoke. Message to future protectors. The great enemy is not dead, only sleeping. The sword is the last gate. If it moves again, the end is near. Kira stared, stunned. The sword wasn't just a weapon. It was a warning system. Meanwhile, Mason was walking through the city streets of Zalara, sword strapped to his back. Everywhere he went, aliens stopped and stared. Some nodded with respect. Others looked away in fear. The sword had chosen a human, and that changed everything. Suddenly, he heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned, fast. A tall alien girl in green armor stood there, arms raised. Wait. I'm not here to fight, she said. Mason narrowed his eyes. Who are you? My name is Clara. I was sent to spy on you, she said honestly. But I changed my mind. Why? She looked at him with sharp eyes. Because the sword chose you. And now they want to kill you. That's not right. Mason gave a short laugh. Welcome to the club, she stepped closer. I know where the next ruin is. But it's not on this planet. Mason raised an eyebrow. Then where? She pointed to the sky, the moon of Darakar. It holds the second key, and the truth about the first human who came before you. Hours later, Mason stood aboard a small stealth ship, lifting off from Zalara with Clara and Kira. The stars stretched around them as they entered space. Darakar was close, a dead moon, silent and gray, but something waited there. The sword pulsed every time they got closer. It was guiding him. Again. They landed in a crater, surrounded by broken stone towers. No birds, no plants, no sound. Mason stepped out first. The sword in his hand glowed white. The ground below him lit up in patterns, lines forming a symbol. A voice echoed from the stone. Protector recognized. Proceed. Suddenly, a part of the crater opened like a mouth, revealing a staircase leading deep underground. Clara looked nervous. Are you sure about this? Mason didn't answer. He just walked down. At the bottom, they entered a giant chamber, walls covered in carvings, not of aliens, of humans. At the center of the room was a statue of a man holding the same sword, Mason's sword, but this statue had a name written. In English, Captain Jonas Reeve, Earth Defense Force, year 2471. Mason froze. Kira, read it aloud. This human was here before your great-great-grandparents were even born. Clara looked confused. Earth had starships back then? Mason whispered. Not in the history books. Suddenly, the sword in Mason's hand glowed red, and a voice came from the statue, a recording. If you are hearing this, Earth has survived, but the threat has returned. I couldn't stop it. I buried the sword here, hoping someone stronger would find it. If you're human, then you're the last hope. Mason stood still. His hands shook. His face was pale. The sword wasn't just old. It was his legacy now. Above them, hidden in orbit. Behind a dead satellite, a large ship watched them silently. Inside, the dark cult leader hissed. They found the second key. Another voice growled. Send the Shadow Fleet. Burn the moon. The order was given. A massive force of ships moved toward Darakar. Silent, invisible, and deadly. The moon was shaking, not from earthquakes, but from ships arriving in stealth. Thousands of black dots pierced the dark side of Darakar, flying like shadows, silent and cold. They circled like vultures. Inside one of them, a commander gave a sharp command. The human found the vault. Burn everything. Leave no trace, especially not him. Outside, the sky looked normal, but death was already falling. Far below the surface, Mason stood in front of a new door. Unlike the last ruin, this one didn't open with symbols or sound. It had a question carved into the stone, in perfect English. Do you know fear? Mason touched the sword. It didn't glow. Clara looked at him. What kind of test is this? Mason stared at the question. Then, softly, he answered, yes. The stone door rumbled and slid open. Inside was not a normal ruin. This place wasn't for records or relics. This place was for testing. A narrow bridge stretched over a pit so deep you couldn't see the bottom. On the walls were carvings of strange creatures, long arms, endless teeth, eyes that stared forever. Kira whispered, These are not alien. These are monsters from Earth myths. Clara's voice was dry. Then why are they here? Mason stepped forward. The sword glowed again, but flickered. Something was wrong. Suddenly, the light went out. Total darkness. Then, a low growl echoed across the chamber. Not human. Not alien. Something else. Mason raised the sword, but it didn't light up. He couldn't see the others anymore. He called out, Kira? Clara? No answer. Instead, a voice, not from around him, but inside him. You are not strong. You are broken, just like the last one. Mason's mind began to twist. He saw flashes, memories that weren't his. A child crying in space as Earth burns, a soldier bleeding alone, whispering apologies to no one. A sword falling into the hands of darkness, then his own face, older, broken, cold. You will fail, just like the first protector. Mason clenched his fists. He shouted into the dark. I don't care what he did. I'm not him. A pulse shot from the sword, weak, but enough to show a shape ahead. Not a wall, not a person, but a mirror, and in the mirror, Mason saw himself, but twisted, a version with black eyes and a cold smile. The voice returned. Face yourself, or die in shadow. Above ground, on the surface of the moon, enemy ships began to land. One of them sent a signal underground. A countdown began. 10 minutes until the ruin is destroyed. Back in the chamber, Mason stared at the twisted version of himself. It stepped forward, swinging a dark copy of the sword. The real Mason blocked just in time. Sparks flew. The fight was fast, brutal, and terrifying. He was fighting not just a shadow, but every weakness he ever had. Every failure. The other Mason knew. All his moves, but didn't have his heart. That was the difference. When the fake raised the sword for a killing blow, Mason did something unexpected. He dropped his own blade. The fake froze. Mason looked him in the eye and said, "I know fear. I've lived with it. But it never controlled me." A beam of light shot from the floor, blasting the fake into ash. The chamber lit up again. The sword returned to Mason's hand on its own. The door ahead opened. Inside the final chamber, a small glowing object hovered in the air. It looked like a star made of glass. Mason reached out, and it floated into the sword, just like the last piece. But this time, something else happened. A hologram appeared in front of him, a human woman in a dark blue uniform. She looked tired and sad. "This is Commander Elise Gray, last survivor of Earth Fleet Echo. If you're seeing this, the enemy is waking up again. We failed to stop it, but the sword remembers. And now it has chosen you. The final keys are hidden on the old battle moons. Find them before the darkness does." Then the hologram ended. Mason stood still. Kira stepped forward. "She was human, like you." Mason nodded slowly. "And she died trying to stop what's coming." He turned to the exit. "We won't let her die for nothing." But when they reached the surface, they saw the sky was no longer empty. Dozens of black ships floated above them like giant insects. One of them opened fire. The sky was on fire. Explosions tore through the silent moon of Darakar. Enemy ships descended like falling knives, black and fast, leaving behind trails of smoke and ruin. Laser blasts scorched the gray surface. Craters lit up like stars, and in the middle of it all, a small ship rose, barely holding together. Inside that ship, Mason Carter gripped the controls. His hands were bleeding. Smoke filled the cockpit. Warning lights flashed red. "Engines are dying." Kira shouted, "We're hit again." Clara yelled from the back. Mason didn't answer. He wasn't flying with hope. He was flying with refusal. Refusal to die. Refusal to fail. And refusal to drop the sword the galaxy told him didn't belong to him. He punched the controls one last time, pushing the ship toward the dark side of the nearby planet. A hidden jump gate shimmered in the distance. He whispered, "Come on." Just before the enemy fleet fired one final blast, they vanished into the jump. Gone. They emerged in the quiet orbit of an abandoned planet. No cities. No signals. Only wreckage. Floating bones of massive ships, rusted, cracked, forgotten. It was called Teveron 6. But in ancient records, it had another name, the Moon of the Last Stand. The final battle in a war no one remembered, except the sword. Mason floated through the wreckage in a small pod. Around him, broken battleships drifted like ghosts, burned flags, cracked hulls, weapons too old to name. But his sword vibratted. Harder. Louder. Like it was screaming without sound. He followed its pull to a ruined space station half buried in a crater. He landed. Inside, the air was stale and still. Lights flickered on as he walked. It was human tech. Earth design. Old but familiar. He stepped into a command room covered in dust. Terminals blinked slowly. Dead screens buzzed. Then, one screen lit up by itself. Identity confirmed. Earth genetic match found. A soft chime. Another hologram appeared. This time, not a person, a recording from over 3,000 years ago. A battle log. Day 91. The Reapers have broken through. Our fleets are gone. Captain Jonas Reeve, lost. Commander Elise Gray, missing. The sword refuses to activate for anyone else. If anyone finds this, Earth didn't die because of war. We died because we forgot. We forgot the enemy. We forgot the warning. We buried our own truth. The sword isn't just a weapon. It's a key to something far older than Earth itself. Find the core before they do. Mason stepped back. His mind raced. He looked at Kira and Clara. The sword isn't just choosing a warrior. It's choosing a witness, Kira said. Tara nodded. Someone to remember. What everyone else has forgotten. Mason turned to a sealed vault door. The sword began to glow, not blue, not red, but white gold. A new color. Brighter than ever. He placed the blade into the lock. It turned. The door opened. Inside. There was no weapon. No treasure. Just truth. Thousands of data drives floated in the air, glowing, humming, waiting. Mason picked one. It opened a recording of Earth itself, long ago, when humans had already reached the stars, fought battles in other galaxies, and lost everything. A super weapon called the Core had been hidden, scattered across old battle moons. And then, Earth wiped its own history, on purpose. Why? Because the enemy they fought wasn't just deadly. It was contagious. A living darkness that infected memory, data, and thought. If you knew it existed, it could find you. That's why Earth buried the truth. That's why the sword was locked. And now, the enemy had woken up again. Suddenly, an alarm screamed. A signal had been sent. Something, or someone, had triggered a hidden satellite. Kira checked the console. Her face went pale. They know we're here. Clara's blade was already drawn. They'll send everything. Mason looked at the sword. It was glowing with a slow, steady heartbeat. He gripped it tightly and said, "Then we send a message back." He inserted the sword into the center of the command terminal. A beam of golden light blasted upward, shooting into space. Not a weapon, not a threat, but a call. To anyone still listening. To any world that still remembered. To every human, or alien, who refused to be silent. The Reapers have returned. The war we forgot is waking up, and this time, we fight together. The galaxy was silent, not because there was peace, but because for the first time in 3,000 years, everyone had heard the same message. A golden signal had been sent across every known star system. It carried a voice, a warning, a call to rise. The Reapers are back. The ancient enemy is not a myth. The sword is awake. The war we forgot has already begun. The message came from one place, a broken moon. From one person, a human. And now, the galaxy had a choice. Believe him, or kill him. Mason stood on the bridge of a new ship, one built by humans and aliens together. Its armor was rough, its shields unstable, and the engines roared like beasts. But it was fast. And it was ready. Across the stars, fleets moved, some toward him to help, others to stop him, because deep in the center of dead space was something older than planets, something called the Core, the final lock, the heart of the swords. Power. If Mason reached it, the sword would unlock fully, and the galaxy would change forever. As his ship approached the edge of the Core's nebula, Clara spoke softly. "You're not a soldier anymore," she said. Mason looked at her. "No," she smiled. "You're a symbol now." Kira stood behind them, reading energy patterns. "We've got incoming. Big incoming." Mason looked out the window. His hands tightened on the sword's hilt. Dozens of ships appeared, but they weren't Reapers. They were allies' alien ships. Human ships. Even pirates. The galaxy was answering his call, not because they trusted him, but because the sword did. Then the enemy arrived. Not ships. Not soldiers. Darkness. It rolled like smoke across space, swallowing stars, turning machines against their pilots, corrupting AI, infecting thought. Ships on the edges fell silent, their lights blinking out one by one. The Reapers had evolved. Now they didn't just destroy, they rewrote. Mason stepped forward. He placed the sword into a slot at the front of the bridge. It sank in. The ship lit up with ancient patterns. Symbols glowed along the walls. Power surged through the metal, and the sword spoke again. But this time, everyone could hear it. Protector confirmed. Heart unlocked. Final defense online. From beneath the ship, Something unfolded. A massive spear of light that stretched for miles. It wasn't just a sword anymore. It was a signal blade. Part weapon, part beacon, part shield. Mason looked to the crew. He said only one word. Push. The battle began. The sword burned through the darkness like a sun. Reaper ships were sliced in half by light. But still they came. Endless, fearless, mindless. All around. Mason's fleet fought hard. Aliens fought next to humans. No more races, no more flags. Just survival. Mason guided the ship into the heart of the nebula. At its center floated the core, a massive structure shaped like an eye. Silent, watching, the sword's glow reached its peak. Mason raised it high. I'm not the first protector, he said, but I'll be the last one standing. He plunged the sword into the core. For a second, nothing happened. Then, everything changed. Light exploded in every direction. Gold, white, red, blue. The Reapers froze in place. Then their ships cracked and turned to dust. The darkness began to retreat. The core lit up from within, no longer a dead thing, but alive. A pulse of energy swept across the galaxy. Planets, long cut off from the stars, suddenly reconnected. Dead machines woke up. Only is remembered who they were. And for the first time in 3 millennia, hope returned. Weeks later, Mason stood alone on Zalara, watching the sunrise. The sword rested in a new stone, glowing softly. Kira walked up beside him. You saved more than lives, she said. You saved the truth. Clara joined them. And you reminded the galaxy of something it forgot. Mason nodded. Humans weren't just survivors, he said quietly. We were protectors. We still are. Behind them, a monument stood tall. Here stood the human who lifted the sword, and with it, lifted the galaxy.